Thanks for the introduction. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. I will start talking to you about the app that we are building today. I want to tell you what it does and how it looks like. Then we'll talk about some of the critical considerations that you should take into account when you start a new Fiori app. Tobias is going to show you how to build the app in a demo. Then we'll come back here and talk about the open source strategy in SAP Fiori tools. The app that we want to build today is an app for a business manager to analyze the travel bookings in order to better negotiate contract terms with agencies or airlines. I have a couple of sketches so that you can see what the app should look like. On the left, we have the startup page. We want to have some filtering capability so the user can filter by fields like the agency. Below that, we want to include a chart so the user can visualize the total number of bookings for the different airlines and can easily compare them. When the user clicks on the airline in the chart, we want to open up the app to show the list of bookings in a side-by-side view. Now that you know about the app that we want to build, let's walk through the decision process. We know that we are building a new app today, so you can ignore what's on the left and focus on what's on the right. Many of you probably had this challenge before when you start a new app. You have a very difficult decision to make. You need to decide whether you're going to build the app using SAP Fiori Elements or you're going to go with Freestyle. Fiori Elements is great. It saves you time. You can leverage on many of the out-of-the-box functionality that is provided. Then you also do less coding in that case. However, it gets complicated when you need something that it's not in the framework. You need to consider the cost of breakouts, and you need to weigh in all the pros and cons between Fiori Elements and Freestyle. It's not an easy decision to make. Now, let me present you with a new way to look at this. With the work that has been done in flexible programming model and also in Fiori tools, we are trying to make this simple for you. You can build an app with Fiori Elements and flexible programming model. You don't need to choose between the two. You can look into the standard floor plans that is provided in Fiori Elements. If you find what you need, that's great. You can already use it and take advantage of the out-of-the-box functionality that is provided. When you don't have what you need in the standard, you can easily add a custom page and go Freestyle with flexible programming model. Remember the app that we are trying to build today. The startup page consists of filtering capabilities on the top and also a chart below that. It does not look like this can be covered with a standard page in Fiori Elements. However, the object page looks very promising for the second page that we want to build, with the attributes on the top panel and then a table below that. We say that the standard floor plan is probably not a good match for the startup page that we want to build. So we'll need a custom page for that. When you have a custom page, you can leverage on the collection of building blocks from flexible programming model. So you do not need to code all the controls from the scratch. And whenever you need to implement custom logic, you can make use of the controller extensions. So this is all looking very good on the paper and on the sketches. It looks like it's a piece of cake to build this with Fiori Elements and flexible programming model. Let me hand this over to Tobias now and see what he says.
Thank you, Ashely. I think that's all I can say. Thank you, especially that you think that's a piece of cake and easy to do. That's typical product owner again. Typical product owner again thinks all is easy. So let's see if it is actually that easy. Ashely, as you know, I'm not sure if we introduced ourselves properly. Ashely is a product owner for the Fiori tools. And she obviously expects me now to use the Fiori tools to generate this application and implement it. And out of protest, because she said it's so easy, I will not use the Fiori tools now. And I will actually take something that is coming from the UI5 community. I'm taking the Easy UI5 generator. And let's see if there's something that we can use today. So let's start the Easy UI5 generator here. If you guys don't know it, check it out. It's a pretty cool Yeoman generator project that allows you to pull in plugins, but you've heard that in the keynote this morning. You see here lots of different projects, but there's also one that has my name behind it. Why? Because I have created a fork of one of the generator project and extended it for today's presentation to allow me to generate a project that makes use of a flexible programming model. So let's start this one and see what's coming up here. And by the way, the pull request for that one is still open, and it's pull request number 42. Yep, I got number 42. And if you like what you see today, I'd like to get you over there, review the pull request, obviously approve it or give proper feedback so that we can get it into standard and you guys can also use it. So we want to generate a project today. Yes, and we want to give it a name. So Ashely wanted something about travel, so let's just call it travel. And we are at we're doing a demo here at UI5con. So let's use that as a namespace. Now the first additional question asked me if I want to enable that application to be able to use a flexible programming model. And well, yeah, of course I want to do it because it will make my life simpler. And it also asked me if I want to enable that project to be visible in the Fiori tools. Out of protest, I should say no here, but that would be rather not intelligent because the Fiori tools are pretty great. If you haven't tried them, try them out. And I think they also be useful later on today. So let's just press enter here. A few standard questions you might know from the UI5 generator. I say just yes without reading them. And now it's another question added for our flexible programming model. So it asked me what should be the start page. Is the start page a floor plan from Fiori elements or is it something custom? And if you remember the mockups, the first one was a custom page. So let's just add a custom page here. Name, let's use standard main. And now it asked me to connect to a service, and I have a service running. The service I have running locally just because it's a presentation. I'm always afraid of network issues, but this can obviously be any kind of service that is reachable via HTTP or HTTPS. So I'm connecting to my service, my travel service running locally. And now it asks me which entity I want to use for the first page. I want to use the booked flights entities. I hope that was the right one, as a booked flights entity, and press enter here. And now Yeoman generator, as you know it, generated all the files and starts now an npm install. So while this one is running, let's have a quick look over here. So it's a standard Easy UI5 project structure. You have a web app folder. Interesting it gets if you look into the component.js. So here you see that we are inheriting from a component coming from Fiori elements. And also if you look at the controller that was generated for my main view here, we're extending the Fiori elements page controller. By doing that, I can make use of some Fiori elements functionality later that I will use or need, for example, for the navigation. Installation has worked, so I'm pretty happy about that. We have a project now. And while I still would like to protest against the Fiori tools, I'll open them now. And you can see here the project is being detected by the Fiori tools. You see that there's an application and can simply click on that button here to start the preview. And now the Fiori tools will start the preview for my application. And you see a very complex application has been created here. We have an empty view, which is called main, as I called it. I should have used a better name, but it's a main view. And now Ashely said we want to have a filter bar on it. Implementing a filter bar is a bit of a tricky thing. Yeah, you can get a few fields together and then have a button that searches, but you also want to have a bit more, like you want to have some proper value helps and so on and so on. So it's a bit of work. And since I don't like work, I know that there's a flexible programming model and that it can help me there. So what do I do if I don't know what to do, but I have heard a term? I just Google it. So let me just Google the flexible programming model for Fiori elements. And what you find is a flexible programming model explorer. A pretty cool tool where you can click around and look how our building blocks work, how they can be used. So for example, we need a filter bar. I'll click on filter bar here. You see the code here on the right side, and you see how it then would be rendered in the middle of the screen. And here you see the code that I actually need to have a filter bar working. I can also change the code, for example, remove these handlers here just to make sure that it will still work even without them. And yes, nothing is broken. So I can copy that beautiful snippet here, go back to my application, go back into my main view. Here we have the content section, and here we have now our new filter bar. There's a small change I need to do. This one was pointing to selection fields annotation with a specific qualifier. In my service, I know there's no specific qualifier, so I want to use a default one. And one important thing that I usually forget when I run my demo in dry runs, but now I remembered it. I need to, of course, add the namespace here. So we use our library here, which is the SAP Fiori macros library. I'm pressing on save here, and let's go back to the browser, and you can see already that we have a filter bar. The filter bar out of the box brings me all the filter fields that were configured in my OData service and annotated. And if I click, for example, on this one, I get automatically a value help without writing a line of code. But obviously that requires that you have an OData service behind it and that it's properly annotated with all the things you need here. So that was the first part. The second part would be adding the chart that Ashely wanted. Again, we're going to the flexible programming model explorer. Here's a chart, actually chart and filter bar that shows me how I tie a filter bar also to a chart. It looks actually pretty close to what we want to build today. And also looking at the code snippet also looks pretty simple. But there's a little problem. So if you also look at the demo application, there's a bit of annotations down here. And I know my service does not have the chart annotated properly. So simply copying the snippet won't solve the problem here. But again, there's something pretty cool in the Fiori tools. It's called guided development. And as the name says, it guides you through development. And if you are somebody who hasn't done something like that before and needs some help here, you can scroll, you can search for the guides. And I have something in here for custom pages specifically. There's a guide to add charts. So let's just click on this one. We start the guide. And now it asks me a few questions that I can actually answer. So it asks me for which entity we want to do it. So we created the page for the booked flights. So that's what I need to annotate. Our chart was something about airlines. Let's just use airline as a qualifier. What do we want to take as a chart title? Flights per airline. I know I'm very creative today again. And as a chart type, we need a column chart. And measure property, again, is our count flights. That gives us a count of flights, as the name indicates. And we want that per airline. So we pick the airline ID here. And then I simply click on Insert Snippet. And what it does for me, it generates the annotation and adds it to my local annotation file. So just with this one click, I have the annotation that I need for my application. And I can close this again, forget about it, and click on the next button. And now it goes to the second step of adding a chart to a screen. It allows me also to create the snippet for the view. I can pick the view here. And in my workspace, I only have one view, so that makes it easy. I can give it an ID. So let's call it the airline chart. The entity type is of booked flights again. And now it will give me a selection of chart annotations. And here's the one that we just created. So let me select this one here. I can associate it to a filter bar. And the filter bar that I earlier created or copy pasted had the ID filter bar. So that fits right here. And I want to add it to the content section. And that's it already. So I can click on Insert. And after clicking on Insert, again, my view is shown here and what I've added to it. So let's also go back and see if that worked. And we're going back to the application, and voila, we already have a chart here. And chart and filter bar actually tied together. So if you look at the numbers, I've right now 1,000 flights for the European airlines. If I just search for open flights, then you see there's only 550. So the connection between chart and the connection between the filter bar worked pretty nicely here. Again, without doing any kind of code, the only thing that I needed to do was I needed to add some additional annotations that were missing in my application, and then add or generate some snippets into the application. Now comes the more difficult part. Ashely wants us to navigate from here. So she wants me to click on this one and then go to a page that actually looked like an object page. So let's talk about this page first. Let's again use the Fiori tools. And if I open the page map, I can see a visualization of all my pages in the application. And you see beautifully visualized, there's just one page. But the good thing is now I can click on plus, and it offers me to add another page to that application, from which actually the other way around, from the page I selected, I can navigate to this page. And here I have the option to add either an object page or a custom page. And we know we want an object page. And thanks to the alphabet, the right entity set is already selected because it starts with A. So my airline is here, but I could also pick anything else. Let's click this one. And now that new page is already being added as something that should be navigated to from my custom page. Let's have a quick look. If you check now the manifest, you see it created the route to that page. It also generates the page target itself and also the additional information for the routing. However, as magic as the tools are, the navigation itself is not there yet, because how should it be? How should now the custom page, the chart, the column know that if you click on it, then you should navigate? So that's something we now need to implement. So we're going back to our main view here. I'm not sure if you noticed it, but earlier when we looked into the flexible programming model explorer, there was something like a selection change event. And this one, I actually want to implement a handler. So let's say on change, let's keep it simple. Very important for me, now check, no typos. It's a typical place where I always make the typos. So I take the on change, and now I'm going back to our controller class and say, okay, let's add that function here. We have the on change here, and this one gets an event. And for this event, we want to implement some handling. The most important thing I need from that event are actually the parameters, and I can get them this event.get parameters. And obviously, before I started that presentation, I studied the API and I know the event, and the event contains something important. It contains selected parameter, which indicates whether the event that is fired is being a selection or an unselection event. Because in our chart, we selected that there's only single select, but you could have a multi-select, so you get lots of complex events there. And here we only care about the selected one, and especially we care about the data that it gives me about the column that was selected. And so this one we can also get for the params. And as I said, it could be a multi-select. Therefore, we get an array of. By the way, if you wonder why it takes so long to press sometimes the buttons here, I'm used to a US keyboard, and this one has a German keyboard, and you don't know how tricky it is to find the proper curly brackets and the corner brackets. So it's option 5, which is something I had to remember before that presentation. So we want to get the first one of that array, and here we want to get the data object, because that should give us the information about which column in the chart was selected. But let's quickly check that. And the data here. So that's just making sure that I didn't do any typos or anything here. Let's go back to the application, click on it. See, I did a typo already. Let's have a quick glance if I find out which one I did. Param selected looks good, looks good, looks good. And I called it on change also here. And this one is the selection change. Wonderful. Okay, let's.
Is the controller the main controller?
So let's also save the file. That's a good one. I didn't have this one in all my dry runs. Let's save a file. And now, wonderful. So that's why I love pair programming. But that's mean if you use guided development, it automatically saves the file. But why does it not automatically know that I want to save this one when I leave the screen? But anyhow, now we have saved the file. Thank you, whoever it was. I owe you a beer. So we have the file. We have now our alert here, and we see that there's an airline ID, and here's the identifier. So that's what we need to navigate to our object page. So let's go back here. Let's go back into the controller, and there's something cool also in Fiori Elements. I can. If I use FPM, I can ask for an extension API, which gives me some access to some exposed Fiori Elements functionality, and there's also some routing. And that routing I would like to use. Let's actually keep that in a variable. I want to use here to do the navigation. So I can now tell my router simply navigate to route. Navigate to route, and it asked me for the target. That one I forgot already. Let's go to the manifest. So I want to go to that object page. Here we have our target. So going back to my controller and adding this one, and it also allows me to give some parameters, again option 8. And I'm not sure if you saw it, but there was the airline key in the route that I need to fill, and this one we just saw is in data airline ID. So we just assign this one here and remove the alert. That one we don't need anymore. And if you now go back, you click on it, voila, the object page is not loading on purpose because I didn't want it to load yet. Let me just read the error message, obviously. So as you can see, this is absolutely incorrect what I did. Yes, I used the right key here, but the key is actually a string. So I think the right navigation would have been that one. And now the object page loads. So let's go back to the controller just for a second here, and let's add some more code. And wait, I need also this one, and we're closing it here again. So I'm just wrapping it in single quotes here. And where is it? Where is it? My goodness, German keyboards. So I think we are good now. Let's save this one. Go back here, and let's go back here one more. I know. Go back here, click one more time on the chart, and voila, now we're at an object page. It nicely navigated me over there. And we are pretty close to what Ashely wanted, but Ashely also had this weird idea that after clicking on it, she wants to see it in some kind of a split screen. Split screen in terms of Fiori is actually our flexible column layout. And I think we heard it in the presentation earlier, flexible column layout is actually not too easy to implement, and also keeping all the models in sync between your pages, that is a bit of effort. And again, I mentioned it earlier, I'm considering myself a little lazy and I don't want to do it all by myself. So I just go again to the page map of the Fiori tools. I say, give me flexible column layout. I'd like to have this kind of view so that the right side is expanded, the left side is not. And everything that was required to be changed in the manifest has just been changed. So the additional libs have been added, the targets have been changed to an array, and a few more configurations down here. And I didn't have to do anything. And all the model syncing behind the scenes is all taken care of by flexible programming model. So I'm super happy here, because without doing anything, I can now deliver the application that Ashely wanted just by clicking around here. I can also make it full screen, make it smaller again. I can close it. So all this was now with the power of the open source community using the easy UI5 generator, with using the Fiori tools for the things that were a little too complicated for me. And why is this all possible? Because we started to extract some of our code, some of our modules of the Fiori tools, put it into an open source repository. And now we started also consuming it, obviously, back into the Fiori tools, but also into other generators like the easy UI5 generators and some more that are used by other people. So this getting it out to the community allowed us to use community work, use our work, and all plays nicely together. Right, Ashely? What do you think about that?
It's awesome. I love it. Now that you talk about how you use easy UI5 generator and making use of the templates in open source, then let me talk about the open source strategy in SAP Fiori tools. Okay, when we started to build SAP Fiori tools, we were very much focused on the capability to accelerate Fiori development. We work with many of our customers and also stakeholders in order to shape those capabilities and fine-tune the features to make it useful and helpful for our developers. We want to take this kind of collaboration to the next level with open source communities. Tobias showed you how the easy generator can make use of the modules in OpenUX tools. This is our strategy to putting individual modules into the open source area. We know that to be successful with open source community, we need to make these modules very independent and very usable for a broader range of developers. And that's our strategy in transitioning SAP Fiori tools into open source. It's our vision that we would eventually completely open source all of SAP Fiori tools to open source. Whenever we add a new extension in Fiori tools, we now also first consider open source as the strategy. Guided Answer, for example, Guided Answer is, by the way, is an extension in which helps the developer troubleshoot problems in Visual Studio Code and Business Application Studio. We started it and published it as open source from the get-go. Eventually, we want to open source all of the extensions in Fiori tools as well. So that takes us to the end of our presentations. If there's any questions, please raise your hand if you're in the audience, or typing in the chat, please.
So there's no questions coming from the chat yet, but we still have a couple of minutes. So I think this should be a good, or this can be a good starting point for a discussion, because what I specifically like is how Tobias demoed the cooperation between the open source available software from the community with the SAP developed open source software, and how this all actually goes together. I mean, I can't be the only one who fiddled like crazy with the flexible column layout, and it only worked half of the time. So having something to click like in the Fiori tools is awesome, because it simply, you know, leverages work that you'd have to do otherwise. And because there are no questions coming up here, I'd like to ask one, or I'd like to ask I'd like to ask something from you more, to say like this. So whenever you publish something as open source, please also be aware of the integration aspects. We've done that very well with the page generators, and it would be excellent if you'd actually do the same thing with whatever you're about to publish, to look where could it hook into the community work, and vice versa, where could you integrate something from the community so it gives a more coherent picture.
Absolutely, I like that ask, and something that we also take very serious. Just this exercise to get the generator running for UI5con was super amazing for me, because I found so many issues in our open source modules, because we built it obviously first for the Fiori tools and they worked nicely there. But then when you really try integrating it somewhere else, you sometimes learn that you did not actually do it as flexible as you wanted. So the learning is also on our side by doing it. So absolutely, we'll take that serious. And there's actually something coming soon that might be interesting for you. So we're also working on getting the test templates out now. A colleague of mine, Vincent from Paris, is working on it. And I know that's a topic that you're also very interested in, because we could also talk about WDI5 in there, if that makes sense, if that can be integrated into the Fiori tool. So definitely something I want to work with you on it, with all of you on it. So
excellent. So I want to throw with this this microphone thing. Oh no, you have it. Huh?
On what level of integration do you plan using the Fiori tools? Is it just on like the more complex stuff, like the flexible column layout, or just like a little bit tedious stuff, like adding dialogue after dialogue after dialogue, or value helps?
We're open-minded here, so I can't actually wait. You know what? That's even better. Ashely, that's a product question. Did you hear the question?
Can you say that again?
Then I'll answer. Okay, so where do we plan to use the Fiori tools on different levels? So we have the Fiori tools. We try to see it actually in levels. Again, I'm repeating myself. So we see on one hand side the development that is on the lowest abstraction level, but needs a higher complexity if you work on it. So the direct coding that you need to do. And we're also looking at the developer that comes purely from, I want to generate my application for a backend service and don't really want to do something except a little bit configuring around. So these two personas we're seeing here. And now we're trying to bring the tools closer together. And as much as possible of the complex and tedious work as we can, we want to bring into simple steps that everyone can use, not only the one that knows exactly how to develop it. But sometimes we also need to be careful, because if you put too much magic in it, people start generating things without really understanding what they're doing there, and then creating a complex mess behind the scenes. That's why the answer is, I don't know exactly for your use case. Talk to us about the use case, and we can see if that is something we believe we can put in there, or if you think, yeah, it might be a little bit too risky to do it. But also open source tooling here again, what you're describing is the typical generator approach. So that might also be something where you say, hey, that easy UI5 thing is pretty cool. Maybe I should create my own project that allows to do the repetitive steps that I have to do all the time, and you put it in a generator that fits for use case, for your use case specifically. You also put it open source into the community. Then maybe over there, he will decide, hey, I also need it, but slightly different. And then you start actually getting this into an open source community, into an open source project, and getting it available for the whole community. And then maybe we in the Fiori tools decide, hey, cool, that stuff also fits into ours. So let's just integrate it here and make it available to everyone here.
A bit like VS Code snippets.
But VS Code snippets are already cool. So then I would ask the question, why do you need more than the VS Code snippets?
You're not allowed to answer that, by the way, because we have several questions coming in here.
Oh no!
So there's one person asking: is there a timeline for completely open sourcing all parts of Fiori tools?
Perfect. This is a product owner question. Ashely, is there a timeline for completely open sourcing all of the Fiori tools?
At this time, I don't think, we have really set a timeline for this. We want to do it right. Like we said, we want to make sure that all these modules are independent and can be reused by a broader range of developers. And that takes time. So this, there is no timeline right now, but we are working on it, and we'll make all these things reusable modules and open source them as soon as we can, because you can already immediately benefit from those.
So the short answer is no. Next question coming in is this working? So I assume the Fiori tools in VS Code, is this working with OData v4 or is it v2 only?
That was a very good question, because I forgot to mention that. I showed you today the flexible programming model and the building blocks. That is only for OData v4. You heard earlier today a presentation about the smart controls for OData v2, and also Fiori elements is there with extension options. But what you saw today, now, in that presentation is only OData v4. Short answer, OData v4 only.
Excellent. So quiet. Oh, can I throw it once at least, please? Yes.
Yes, so the question would be, in your plan, I didn't see a freestyle application. So does it mean that freestyle application would be a better approach in some time? Or may it still take a place? Well, I mean, in your plan, which you show,
Yeah.
but this is decision plan.
I know what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, we see different layers here. Also, if you look at our open source modules, you also see the layers in the modules that we still start with a UI5 application at the bottom with no Fiori elements, no flexible programming model in there. And also the Fiori generator will, I promise it not as a feature because she's a product owner, will always contain that option that you just generate this blank application. And even if we would remove it, Easy UI5 allows you to do it. On top of it, we set the flexible programming model, and you can use it, or if you don't want to use it, don't use it. We put it in the plan only as an alternative option because we're focusing mostly on the enterprise. We're focusing here on the OData v4 applications. And there we believe that FPM should almost always make sense for you. But if you have a case where you don't use FPM, yes, go for it, still go without FPM. The good thing is you can also start without FPM, then change it later, edit, or start with FPM, remove it later. You can grow as you go with this one. By the way, tomorrow at 10:30ish, guys, look at me, am I right? Tomorrow, Holger and Marius will actually talk about it, and you will hear that again from a partner, somebody not from SAP, but a partner who also started using our building blocks. So if you didn't trust us today, come tomorrow and watch them doing it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I quickly add to that, Tobias, I would give you the explanation to say as soon as we would use smart controls in the V2 app, in the V4 world, this is taking the FPM, right? So as soon as you would have used smart controls, then the V4 world, it's FPM.
Someone from the back, please. Oh, shit. Tobias, come on.
That's a tough one. Wow. Oh, wow.
These Fiori element tools, actually, they are plugins for Business Application Studio and VS Code. Do you already have it in already offering or plans for offering also for Eclipse TEA?
No.
As a native plugin?
Again, the product owner question, Ashely. Our plugins are for VS Code and therefore also for BAS. Do we also plan to support any other IDEs?
Not in terms of a fully integrated experience. We do hope that at one point we might also publish to Open VSX, which is then you can make your choice of the CI development. However, the platform that we are supporting right now, we are really focusing on Visual Studio Code and Business Application Studio.
Because if it's open source, I actually can fork it and push it as my plugin to OpenVSX. So maybe you should be a little bit faster than me.
Of course, we will try as fast as possible, and we have to prioritize whatever comes in.
Yes.
Thank you, Ashely. Thank you, Tobias. I think excellent session. See you at the beers.
That sounds perfect.